Hey everyone, today we are going to create these lovely cards using the Hollyberry Happiness stamp set. So without further ado, let's get stamping. Hello everyone, it's me, Centera, coming to you from thecraftsurgeon.com, and today I wanted to share with you this lovely card. Now, this card design was not my own. I actually cased this off of a UK demo, and her name was Tanya Pratt, and we actually attended an event a few weeks back, and we took part in a swap, and this was one of the cards that she had. Now, I didn't have the same stamp set that she used on her card, so I had to kind of remix it a little bit. Now, there are two techniques that we're going to focus on today, and that is sponging and embossing. So let me go ahead and tell you what you're going to need to create this project. Alright, so let's put these to the side. So first you're going to need the stamp set. It is called Hollyberry Happiness. It has 17 stamps, and they are photopolymer. So you can see them here. This is what photopolymer stamps look like. You will also need the hardwood background stamp. Now that is what I used to create this backdrop on the card. And you're going to need some sort of sentiment. Any sentiment will do. I specifically used the Celebrate the Season sentiment out of the Tags and Trimmings stamp set. Now this stamp set is so brand new that it isn't even available yet. So it is in our holiday catalog, and as a demonstrator we get the perk of being able to order our catalogs early. So that is a bonus. So you as customers will not be able to order out of it until September 1st. So you're also going to need some acrylic blocks, and some inks. So the inks I used were specifically Old Olive, Real Red, and Crumb Cake. You're also going to need some sort of embossing ink. Now, Stampin' Up carries Versamark, and I just ordered it, but I don't have it yet. So I'm using what I have in my stash. I also have some white embossing powder. And to emboss your images, you are going to need some sort of heat tool. Now, Stampin' Up also carries a heat tool, but before I had Stampin' Up, this is the one that I have. That's why mine's blue. Alright, you're going to need some Snail Adhesive, some Stella. Now, just so you know, customers who order from our online store a minimum of $30, you will receive a free Stella pen for free. You're going to need some sponges or a sponge, a bone folder, and cardstock. So here are the measurements. So I decided to do a different fold this time. I did a top fold. So I cut my cardstock hot dog style, and here are the measurements. So for your Old Olive, it's going to be 11 inches by 4¼ inches, scored at 5½ inches. You're also going to need a piece of Whisper White, and this is going to measure at 5¼ inches by 4 inches. And then you're going to need a piece of Crumb Cake that measures 5 inches by 3¾ So let's set that to the side. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin stamping. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stamp our hardwood backdrop onto our piece of Crumb Cake. So a really neat tip here is when you are working with big, gigantic background stamps, instead of taking the stamp to the ink, you do the opposite. You take the ink to the stamp. So that way you can get a better coverage of ink over the stamp. Now I'm going to place my cardstock on top of the stamp, lining it up, and then I'm going to rub around the back side so that way I'll have even coverage around the stamp, or excuse me, around the cardstock. All right, see? Beautiful. So let's set that to the side. And now we are going to create our wreath of holly. There's a lot of holly and there's a lot of berry. Alright, so I'm specifically using the small stamps in this set along with the solid colored berries. So what you will need to need for this, I did put a little circle. I die cut a circle to give me some sort of guideline on how to stamp the leaves around, because I'm not good at just eyeballing a circle. Alright, so here's a little circle that I used. I think it's like the second from the smallest. So I'm just going to use the outline of the circle as a guideline. Now I'm not stamping on top of the circle at all. I'm just stamping a few leaves, the solid leaves, around the circle just to give me an idea. It's kind of like an invisible line to follow. After I'm done stamping all around the circle, I'm just going to take the circle off and fill in the empty spaces. Now it's time to stamp the berries. Alright, perfect. So I'm cleaning my stamp off and I'm going to allow this to dry. Just give it a little bit to dry. This just helps out when it's time for me to emboss. I don't have to worry about any of the powder sticking to my berries or to the leaves. Alright, so now it's time to emboss. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your Versamark or whatever kind of embossing ink that you have, and you're going to ink up your sentiment. And like I said, I'm using the sentiment from the Tags and Trimmings stamp set. Just got to make sure it's lined up. And then I am going to ink it up with the clear ink. So when you stamp this on, you're not going to be able to tell that you stamped it too much because it is clear. So you just got to make sure that you just ink it up really well. Now the good thing, or the cool thing about this type of ink is that it takes a minute to dry, giving me enough time to set the powder on top of it. So you are going to need a scrap piece of paper for this part. And I'm just going to take the powder and sprinkle a little bit of it onto the cardstock where my sentiment was stamped. So you don't really need a lot. Now one thing that I do not have that I just ordered as well, and I feel like it helps out with like static and just the random powder spreading all over your project. We have what's called an Embossing Buddy. So if you notice here, you can see that there's powder all around my wreath and not just laying on the sentiment. So if I had the Embossing Buddy, it would help out. All I would do is just pat it around the paper, and then it would prevent it from going into places where it doesn't belong. So I'm flicking off the excess, and then I'm going to go in with a paintbrush and kind of brush off any excess powder. And like I said, if you had the Embossing Buddy, it would it would eliminate this part. But you know what? I actually got a really good idea. So I'm deciding to kind of add a little bit of flair to this card. So I am going to, before I put the powder back in the jar, I'm going to take my Timeless Texture stamp set. There's some splatters on there. And I'm going to just place some splatters on the outside, just randomly on the card. I feel like that'll give it a nice touch. Alright, so I'm going to take some more powder and do the same process like I did for the sentiment. Making sure not to use too much. And just touch it up, tap off the excess with the paintbrush. Alright, so now the cool thing about having that extra sheet of paper underneath your project is it gives you, if you fold it in half before you work on it, you're able to pour your powder back into the jar so you don't make a gigantic mess. So we're going to put all this stuff away because I don't want, when I do my heat gun, I don't want powder and stuff flying all over the place or heating up and melting onto my workstation. So I'm going to just take my heat tool. I'm going to allow it to warm up just a little bit before I start to paint it over my cardstock. Alright, so all you have to do is just apply the heat tool and allow the heat to melt the powder or to emboss it. And you'll know when it's starting to emboss because the powder will turn shine. It'll get shiny. Alright, we're done. So embossing doesn't really take that long. I think this is one of my favorite techniques. I don't do it very often, but you'll see that? It's really pretty. Alright. So now we're going to assemble our card, but before we do that, I actually forgot I forgot one of the steps in the beginning. So before I stamped on the wreath and stamped my sentiment and stuff on, I should have sponged my project, but it's not too late. So I'm going to go ahead and do that after I finish creasing my card and folding it. So we're just going to move that out of the way real quick. I'm going to take my crumb cake and I'm going to apply my sponge to my ink pad just to get just a little bit of ink on the sponge. And then I'm just going to brush it over my project. Now this technique is really cool because it gives your project a different kind of effect. I like how it looks kind of antique-y when you're done. I'm rubbing it around the edges and then I'm going to rub it onto the actual base itself. Alright, there we go. Now we can assemble our card. And this part is really easy. Because all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Stella adhesive and adhere my piece of Whisper White onto my old Olive Cardstock base. Hopefully I can get it straight. Nope, it's not straight. Let's try this again. Alright, so now we're going to flip over our piece of crumb cake and we're going to apply some Snail adhesive to that as well. And then put it on top of the Whisper White. And there you have it. It's a simple card. Now you do have the option. You could put a piece of Whisper White on the inside if you decided to write inside of the card, but I just skipped that step. But it's always optional to do that. So for some finishing touches, I'm just adding my Wink of Stella glitter pen to all of my white embossed pieces. Alright, and here are the cards, all completed, ready for the holidays. Alright, so if you liked watching this video tutorial, you'll find a PDF on my blog that contains all of the dimensions, a supply list, and written instructions. I'll post a link down in the description box. Also, make sure that you comment, like, and don't forget to subscribe to get the latest and greatest project ideas and Stampin' Up! News. Thanks for watching, and happy stamping!